You're listening to the Lost Geographer podcast, and this is episode 26 on Iraq.
In our modern globalized society, understanding geography and culture is crucial if you want to succeed in life. Unfortunately, many people are still unaware of the world around them, which is fueled by media that are focused only on profits, clicks, and promoting agendas rather than providing accurate information. Here at the Lost Geographer, we aim to promote geographic and cultural literacy through education and travel by bypassing the media. We have guests who talk about their own countries from a native perspective, travellers telling their stories and lessons, and related topics that will aid you on your journey towards geographic and cultural literacy. Get the raw, candid truth about the world we live in and understand your place in it. Because at the end of the day, it's your world. Own it.
Hey everybody, so while this podcast and site do increase your geographic and cultural literacy, the best way to attain literacy is through travel. Now, I understand that many people think traveling is expensive and stressful, and understandably so. However, it doesn't have to be this way. Traveling can be cheap and relatively stress-free if you know the right places to look for flights and already have an understanding of common travel mistakes. If you want to learn how, check out The Ultimate Guide to Smart Budget Traveling. It's a video course that will teach you how to save hundreds on your next vacation and thousands throughout your life by showing you how to make different rewards programs work for you and introduce you to sites that have prices you could have only dreamed of. I will show you how I've done things such as book transatlantic and transcontinental flights in the US for less than $10, and how I don't pay ATM fees anywhere in the world and withdraw money according to the exact exchange rate and not get ripped off. Want to learn more? Check out literacy.thelostgeographer.net for more information. Consider it an investment to learn how to invest in experiences to become geographically and culturally literate. Again, you can find it at literacy.thelostgeographer.net. Hey everybody, welcome to the Lost Geographer podcast, where our goal is to promote geographic and cultural literacy. It's your world, own it. I'm your host, Rohit Amruther, founder of The Lost Geographer. You can find us at www.thelostgeographer.net. That's .net, not .com. And in this episode, we're headed back to the Middle East after a short hiatus. And I'm here with Marwan from Iraq. How you doing, bud?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing all right as well. Thank you. So, Marwan studies with me. We both study chemical engineering, and he came from Iraq 10 years ago, yeah?
About 80 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, where all you've lived?
Yeah, I'm Marwan. I'm 23 years old. I lived in Iraq for 14 years. And then I moved to Syria for about a year and a half. And then we came to the United States in 2008.
Cool. So where all did you live in Iraq and in Syria?
So I was born in Baghdad. Lived there pretty much my entire time in Iraq. I've visited Mosul a few times, and I've been to other areas in the Middle East. Visited Jordan, almost went to Lebanon.
Sweet. So let's get right into the meat. Can you talk about some manners and etiquette that people in Iraq observe that people in other countries don't observe?
Sure. It's a very conservative country. Family time is still a big thing there. You know, we're always together for lunch, dinners. Every time you're on the street, you greet anyone you see, and everyone is friendly, outgoing. And
so is it common for kids to stay at home with their parents even when they grow older?
Yes, it is. It is very common. Most growing up, you know, when kids grow up, they usually take care of their parents, and the parents usually live with their, eldest son when they grow older, and the children usually take care of their parents when they get old.
And so, let's say, going back to the idea of like being able to talk to people on the street, how do you greet a person usually?
You just say "Salam alaikum," which is equivalent of hello, and it's a greeting, and then the other person responds with "Alaikum salam," which is peace with you, be with you as well. And if you usually start a little conversation if you know the person.
Do you shake hands or?
Yes, shaking hands is common. If you see another man on the street, usually, you shake their hands if you know them. Otherwise, if you're just passing by, you just say hi and move on.
Okay, and how would you, if you're a man, how would you greet a woman?
You should just say salam alaikum, and the Muslim culture would not, you would not shake a strange woman's hand, so you just nod and say salam alaikum.
Okay, cool. Got it. And so do you have any other cool manners and etiquette that the audience could benefit from knowing?
Yeah, Iraqis are not usually on time if they would say, we'll come over at 7 o'clock. It might be till 9 o'clock at night until, they come over. And that's very common, they would give you a time of arrival, but they would not show up on time at all.
And so if you have a guest, what do you offer them usually?
So you start with either tea or Turkish coffee, followed by a big meal most of the time, because every time guests come over, usually cook an entire meal for them. Yeah, and then followed by like a juice or any other refreshments that you think you could think of or is available for you in the house.
What is Iraqi cuisine like?
It's very similar to Indian cuisine and like other similar Middle Eastern countries. So there's a lot of rice, a lot of meat. We eat a lot of lamb, chicken, beef, no pork at all, no pig products.
What's your favorite dish, personally?
My favorite dish is biryani. I know it's an Indian dish, but we have our own version of it. We put some cardamom and other different mixes that of spices that we do, and it's really, really good.
So yeah, I can attest that biryani is really good. What meat do you usually put on biryani?
Lamb.
Lamb. Okay.
Lamb is delicious.
Yeah, I usually eat vegetable biryani. All right, so moving on, let's go into business. So when I talk about business, I mean, what's the current business climate like in Iraq? And if I were to do business with an Iraqi, what would it be like? Would it be professional, unprofessional? Is it laid back?
If you're an entrepreneur, you would import things into Iraq because we don't have a lot of local like Iraqi-made products. We import things from China, Indonesia, Pakistan. So if you would like to do business, you would have to import it and open a shop in Iraq and, sell your product there.
Is that because of the lack of natural resources?
I wouldn't say it's not no natural resources. It's the situation there that, limits production. Mm-hmm. The lack of electricity and manpower at this point. But if people buy imported things all the time there, and that's the way the market is going right now. In terms of professionalism, most people are laid back. So if you have your own shop, you're fairly laid back and you don't have to be as professional as the market in here. Unless you're working in a bank or a professional place, then you would be professional. It's not the greatest time to be doing business in Iraq due to the current situation with the safety and all of current events happening with ISIS. But I'm really hoping in a few years things will bounce back and business will be going again.
All right, cool. So moving on, let's talk about interesting cultural facts. So what do you think are some interesting cultural facts that you think the audience would benefit from knowing about Iraq?
Oh, yeah. So the start of civilization 5,000 years ago, Mesopotamia was in that region of Iraq and Syria and the Islamic Empire and all those religions. Started in Saudi Arabia and they certainly moved up north to the Iraq region. Also, we have a lot of really, really interesting ruins in Babylon and up north in Mosul and Karbala. So there is a lot of history in Iraq and a lot of really, really cool ruins that still exist to this day. Some artifacts are actually in Paris and Germany in some museums. So there are a lot of interesting things in there.
Yeah, I remember reading in history class that Baghdad used to be like the House of Wisdom and everything. The House of Wisdom was there and it was like a huge educational center and like a kind of like a hotbed of intellectual ideas.
Oh, yes, that's definitely true.
What other interesting cultural facts do you have?
So most people are very generous. They would offer what they have to share. Like if you ever, are hungry, anybody would always feed you. If you ask anybody for food, they're always very generous with their hospitality and they would be more than happy to share anything that they have.
Even if you're a stranger on the street?
Yes. Even if you're a stranger on the street, if you really need something, you could always knock on a door and somebody will always help you out.
That's cool. That's good to know. It's kind of like a very neighborly society. So would you say, do you all feel really close to one another?
Yes. Neighbors are like family. All neighbors know who you are. And a lot of neighbors are really, really close friends. they would always visit. They would always ask about you. They would, if you ever need anything, they're always there for you. So anybody who lives near you is practically family there.
So moving on. So for all the cultures that you've lived in, how would you say that the cultures compare?
So between the United States and Iraq, the biggest thing that was different for me are the schools. So all the way through high school, it was much harder than the high schools here. In 12th grade is what decides your fate in Iraq. We have a national exam. And if you do really well, you get into the better colleges and better programs. So if you have the highest average in the country, you could go into the medical schools. And if you go a little lower, you go into engineering, and, it goes on and on until you might have to repeat 12th grade again to get a better grade. But in here, it was such a shock that high school was really easy. And it's really not comparable to there. And then going to college here is much harder than I thought it would be, than high school. So, the education is definitely the hardest. Well, it was the most different, cultural aspect that I can think of.
Is Iraq like other Middle Eastern countries where college is free?
Yes. So as I said, if you do well on the national exam in 12th grade, college is free for the years you go to it. And, so everything is free, no tuition. Living arrangements are fairly easy and so on.
Do you have to be fluent in English by the time you're done with high school, or?
It really depends on what you will be majoring in. So if you go into the medical field or engineering, it would help if you know more English than other fields, I would say.
Because Iraq was a British colony, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And we start learning English in the 5th grade. They would teach you the ABCs, and it will progress until you graduate.
When you're talking about cultures comparing, I'm just curious, going to Iraq, how different is your culture than, let's say, the Kurdish culture?
It is very similar. There's only a language difference. They speak Kurdish, and some of them do know Arabic. I think it's just a language difference.
Where are Kurds usually concentrated in Iraq?
So the very northern part of the country, up the border of Turkey, and I think there are some Kurds in northern Syria as well. But in Iraq, they're near Mosul, and that's where most of the Kurds live. So is Erbil.
So what is your favorite thing about Iraq? What makes you most proud to be Iraqi?
I would say the people. Iraqis are the strongest when they're united. And I just love when we all come together. Whenever there's an Iraqi national team, like soccer national team, is playing, the entire country is watching. The entire country is anticipating a goal or, a win. And whenever we accomplish something, soccer is just a simple example, but whenever we accomplish something as simple as that, everybody's happy, everybody's cheering, everybody's out on the streets, So, yeah, definitely, whenever we're united and we're happy, it's a great feeling.
And so what would you say is the most underrated aspect about your country? What do you feel like it doesn't get enough credit for?
I wouldn't say it's very underrated, but again, I said this before, but I think the generosity of the people is really a great thing. And if you've never experienced it, I would go out and talk to an Iraqi. It's pretty good.
You can just go up to one on the street and say hi?
Yeah, definitely. And they will be really friendly, and they'll be happy to talk to you.
Sweet. So to finish off this episode, if you were to recommend like a book or fiction or nonfiction to recommend to the audience if they were more interested in learning about Iraq, its culture, or its history, what would you recommend?
So this one is a fictional one. I would recommend reading Thousand Night and a Night. It's a classic fiction. It's a collection of Middle Eastern entertainment about folk tales from the Islamic Gold Age. So it's a really good read, and I would definitely recommend reading it. It's translated in English, and I would give it a try.
Yeah, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes of this episode so you guys can find that. Just go to www.thelostgeographer.net/podcast. This is episode 26 about Iraq. Just click on it and you'll see the show notes. But that's going to conclude our podcast. And Marwan, thank you for being on the podcast, talking about a country that's been so hot in the news lately. It's good to cover it.
You bet.
So to the audience, Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lost Geographer podcast. And as usual, remember to tune in next week for more awesome content. Until then, it's your world. Own it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Lost Geographer podcast. Remember to tune in next week for another episode to aid you on your journey towards geographic and cultural literacy. In order to help spread the word, please rate, review, subscribe, and share the podcast so that we can help create a new wave of understanding in our world. Remember, it's your world. Own it.